All right, so if you want to start it off, Brother Reggie, I'm here.
Okay. Well, thanks Unbiased Sports for putting the show on last night. I wish I would have got a chance to be live when you were making some comments. Um, and thanks for reviewing parts of what my conversation with Mike Larry is.
Yeah.
Um, for the audience, I have a degree in computer science. But while I was in the computer science program, I began to take Black Studies classes in about 1982, I think with Professor Edward Scobie to first fill my caseload on classes. And then uh, I ended up taking Dr. Leonard Jeffries' class, Black Roots Seminary, and then after I took that, I started minoring in Black Studies. Um, I received the Honors Award when I graduated in 1988 uh, in the award for Black Studies, which was given at commencement. And so I went to the honors commencement, which is a separate commencement. I didn't go to the formal graduation. And Dr. Leonard Jeffries, gave me the award in front of all those that were being conferred with honorary awards. During that course of 82 to when I graduated, I got introduced to Dr. John Henry Clark and Dr. Joseph Benjo Cannon, Dr. Jacob Carruthers, Dr. Richetti, ASCAC, the organization, and that included the chair of Howard University's African American Studies program, Dr. Greg Carr, Dr. Mario Beatty, and a host of scholars. And then throughout my uh, uh, years after that, beginning there, I was an organizer of Hajj Malik El Shabaz's annual pilgrimage, where I met a lot of people that worked with Malcolm. And it's been so many years, so many of those people have passed. But through the course of the year, I met many, many freedom fighters. I also, during the course, spoke to several times Dr. Henry Louis Gates and Dr. Cornel West and a whole group of other scholars along the way. Had conversations with a small conversation with Dr. Gerald Horn and certainly the Dr. Jahi Issa, who I did a lot of work with on the reparations and illegal slave trade. I spoke at the City Hall um, 2011 town hall meeting at City Hall on reparations, and I was a speaker there. And I spoke with my former boss, uh, Howard Dodson of the Schomburg Center for Research in Black Culture, Dr. Leonard Jeffries, Professor Small, and Helmut Farmer, who did the last reparations case. And of course, Bill Perkins and Charles Barron, and a lot of people that was interested in working on reparations in the United States. I published a article called Reparations is Dead, How to Resurrect It with Dr. Jahi Issa. I wrote to the Supreme Court on a case of a young African American who was discriminated against, and uh, he was trying to get senatorial to the Supreme Court, and I wrote a friends of the court brief, and I wrote a very novel approach because I was not a lawyer, mm, and but I created a kind of a status. It was ultimately rejected because I wasn't a lawyer. Fine. I've also studied Dr. Ogletree's work on reparations, and so I have been an activist in the Black community since 1984. So I've read more than 150 books on the subject, and I presented. And So now we're here. We're here talking about some um, lineage called FBA, and so you heard my comments with Mike Larry. I am a Black nationalist. I have Pan Africanist consciousness, but Pan Africanism is just an idea. But generally, in short, it really just means the unity of all African people. Those in Africa, those in the America, those in South America, those in the Caribbean, and those in Europe. So I've studied the Pan-African conferences. My professor, Edward Scobie, actually went to the Pan-African conference in Manchester. He was a fighter pilot for the UK. And so I paid attention to the ADOS movement. I paid attention to, I will say, the FBA movement. I've met Tariq Nasheed. He's my brother. I just disagree with some of his rhetoric. Even my professor, James Small, who worked closely with him, disagrees.
Is explaining what Foundation of Black American is and tell them I'm both.
Explaining what Foundation of Black American is and tell them I'm both.
Foundation of Black American, that we have a right to identify ourselves in the same way any other ethnic group.
Even my professor, James Small, who worked closely with him, disagrees.
Even my professor, James Small, who worked closely with him, disagrees. Dr. Leonard Jeffries disagrees with his with some of his rhetoric, but we maintain a cordial relationship. So a lot of people see Tariq Nasheed on YouTube and other social media. I've got a chance to talk with him. As I've talked to so many people, Black leaders along the way, Black leaders from various, can I say, places and walks of life, and in the context of the Black struggle.
Actually, Professor Smalls agrees with Tariq that he is FBA. He's FBA and Pan-Africanist.
What I find unbiased sports is that many people are joining this movement, which they call a lineage. And that's fine, but in my studies of Black history, we were the enslaved, who were human trafficked. I'm not going to call us slaves, but we were enslaved. That we there were several migration movements into the United States by Africans before slavery and Africans after. And I heard you talking to Stupies, shout out to Stupies, about the immigration, the large immigration of Jamaicans. I did have an issue with that because Booker T. Okay, so we get into some of the stuff. So, what differences do you have with me in what you think I'm saying? I want to clear that up.
Yeah, so when I listened to you, I was trying to like figure out what you disagree with as far as the idea of FBA. Now, I understand that you...
Is it my volume or yours? So let me see if I could turn up my volume. It might be on my side.
Let me say it again. Hello? You can hear me? Can you hear me better?
I'm going to turn up my volume.
Okay.
Okay. So go ahead.
I see people tying Tariq Nasheed to FBA. Okay. I think that's unfair because Jesse Jackson came up with African American, and we call ourselves African American. Nobody tie us with his entire Christianity and whatever he got going on. It's like, to me, just an identity to be more fitting and more exclusive to other ethnic groups, to other races, to others, period. So I was like, why would Brother Reggie have an issue with descendants of slaves in America who's trying to come up with a more fitting title that is all exclusive, no different than Jamaica. Because when Jamaicans or whoever come over here, they check the box. The box is going to say white, Latino, non-Latino, black / African American, and other. I don't think they're typing. I don't think they're selecting other. I think they click African American.
Okay. Well, Africans, African Americans, Black Americans, we have as a population no threat from the migrant or the voluntary migrating Africans, and what we are is a portion of the Black experience in the United States, where we fundamentally are a nation away from home. But we have no threat from those populations. The threat is really against the European populations.
Well, they are a threat because they do join with Team White Supremacy, and with Team White Supremacy talking points, therefore moving the needle.
The biggest, some of the biggest threats we had was the more recent immigrants of whites from Europe, the Irish and the Italian, and certainly the old groups, the white Anglo-Saxon Protestants, those that were British. Those were British before they rebelled against Britain, right? They rebelled against Britain for none of the things that we actually went through. They went through because they thought they was being taxed without representation, but they weren't enslaved. And so they were rebels, and they won, and they get to tell their story. And they continue the British enslavement. My problem is the rhetoric against a minority of Black migrants that don't move the needle. They are not, or they, who's taking our jobs? Well, who's taking our jobs? Well, now we have a bigger threat of South American, Native American groups, Mexicans and Nicaraguas and other groups from, and they are coming into America. And the problem is that the same Black people that you want to classify as FBAs, many of them, what they are really Democrats. They forgot who they are, and they cater to those groups. Those groups are the most dangerous groups because in their second and third generation, from the populations that they came in, not doing anything for this or enduring any of the pain and suffering, in their second and third generations, they will vote us out. We, as Black Americans, we find ways to criticize everybody else, and but we haven't found unity because we like to criticize, and so sometimes we are a threat to ourselves.
The Caribbean haven't found unity because they like to criticize as well, so much so that the West Indies Federation collapsed due to all the internal criticism they have for themselves.
The FBA groups, the problem is what is the definition of an FBA? We are looking at that population, but largely the so-called FBA organization has done what against the migrations, the recent migrations, has done what against the Irish and Italian and Jewish populations? Where's the criticism with them? We use our social media time to criticize a few people that you can find that say derogatory things, but we as a people need to fix our own problems of criticizing each other within our cities. One city is against another city, right? One county is against another county. One group of Blacks in one state is against another state. Those are the things that we as Black Americans have to fix. And their mama told them that's in the yard, that the Yankees are dirty, the Yankees don't want to work. That's fine, but they don't move the needle.
Brother, those talking points are echoed by white supremacists, and it moves the needle.
They don't make policy. They don't do the things that we can do. The question is, the bulk of our people are outside of the political structures that we need to. We don't focus on that. But I'm a little older than I guess most FBAs. And when I was taking on Black Studies, we used the terms that we used were enslaved. We used Black American, Afro-American. We used Negro. We understood what colored was. We understood these terms. So I have a kind of a larger groups of people who are not Black Americans who were enslaved. I speak to a lot of academics. I think that a lot of people who are so-called FBAs, and FBA, let's just agree with one thing, that's a new term. This freedmen stuff, people don't read their history. It was the Freedmen's Bureau was created by an act for helping kind of a welfare organization to help Black Americans or African Americans who were formerly enslaved support them. And it lasted to 1872. This is during the Lincoln administration, and it lasted to about 1872, and it was heavily criticized by actually Black Americans. And so who criticized it? Du Bois was one of the biggest critics of the Freedmen's Bureau. First of all, it was a bureau of white people to so-called give us peanuts, closing, and negotiate some issues. But it wasn't a status of liberation. It was just a status of what do we do with all these Blacks that have been freed? So they called us freedmen. We can't do nothing with that term at all. So I want to just discard that because that's not a permanent status. That was a name given to us by white people, and the Freedmen Bureau ended. So that's not a status for us. And I've argued with people who do these lineages and statuses and epigenics and all this stuff. I've done that.
The Freedmen's Bureau, was it the same as freedmen's status? No, freedmen, freed people, and the Freedmen's Bureau were not the same thing. The Freedmen's Bureau, Bureau of Refugees, Freedmen and Abandoned Lands, was a federal agency created in 1865 to help formerly enslaved people transition to freedom. It was not a legal status, but rather a government effort to support freedmen. Differences between freedmen and the Freedmen's Bureau. Freedmen, freed people. Legal status of former enslaved individuals after slavery ended. A government agency established to assist freedmen. Freedmen were legally free but socially and economically oppressed. They were not given full equality immediately and faced systemic barriers to land ownership, employment and political participation. The Freedmen's Bureau was created to assist them, but it was underfunded and eventually dissolved in 1872 due to political opposition. Despite these challenges, freedmen played a critical role in shaping the post-slavery era, advocating for civil rights and building black communities.
But I want to say that this back and forth is people looking for things to make people a scapegoat without actually, one, doing the work, because the FBA groups are not necessarily equipped to handle or do anything with reparations. Their arguments are just all over the place. They want to start our journey at 1526, right, with the Spanish bringing blacks into Florida. Most of those Africans worked sun up and sundown during the Spanish. Many of them never met the Black Americans, the later Black Americans. There was the Louisiana Purchase, right? And yes, there were Black folks that were enslaved by the French, right? And you find them in Louisiana, in those parts. Those groups of people, this is early, what do you call Black America. So we can't get any rights from the Spanish reparations. If we are able to do reparations well, we may be, in this country, we may be able to get reparations from the British, right? But what I'm saying is that the FBA groups are not even equipped. They're not lawyers. They're not politicians. ADOS and FBA were started as reparations movements. ADOS, they, how can I say, Yvette and Tone are very educated people. Yvette worked in Washington, D.C. Yvette was trying to, with Tone, was in fact trying to be kind of a lobbyist organization. But the reparations movement had been started much earlier with Conyers and H.R. 40, right? There's no terminology in the study of African American or Black Americans. So the reparations part is not, okay, the reparations is about what? It's about making a case to America that they owe us for ill-gotten goods that they received in labor, right? For descendants of those that were enslaved, right? Reparations movement is about repair to largely first Black Americans who can trace their ancestry to slavery. There was a federal case called the Pellman Farmer case, which was our last reparations case, right, that failed. I don't know how many people read that case. I met her. I followed it. I looked at the end result of the case and the arguments on which they failed, right? And the Pellman Farmer, the woman that did it, she wasn't even, watch this, she wasn't even what you would call foundational Black American. And her partner was a white person.
What's the problem with that?
Ultimately, the case basically said that she couldn't even link her family to those banks that she was suing, right? So the case basically failed to state a claim. And so my point of making that point is that to do certain things, you have to qualify. So if I share my screen, the difference between, let's say here, the difference between me is that me being a member of my family in the South, I was born in the South to Southern parents from Virginia, my father from North Carolina. I knew some of my great grandparents, not all of them. And so the difference between me is that for my family rights, oh shoot, what happened here? For my family rights, is this the one? For my family rights, I could trace my parents, I could trace my grandparents, I could trace my great grandparents, and I could trace some of my great great grandparents, right? You would want to use people like me instead of, and having to know that almost all of them, except for the ones who are white, right, or what you call traditional Black Americans. You might want to call them foundational Black Americans, but I'm using a terminology that that is earlier terminology. So the reason why I'm showing this is because most people say that they are FBA, but they don't really know where their great-grandparents come from. So it was Booker T. Washington in 1915, in the last years of his life, that he challenged and succeeded in challenging the African exclusion measure. So the African exclusion measure prohibited any Blacks from from coming into the United States from any place because of the problems of slavery. But slavery is over in 1915, but white folks are importing new, fresh white folks that will be Americans in 2 or 3 generations. They will be white. And our populations have been devastated because of the treatment of Africans, right? Devastated during slavery, then devastated during Reconstruction, devastated during the Black Codes. And so Booker T. Washington came up with a plan that we needed fresh, new, fresh Black people.
Booker T. Washington's views on West Indian and Caribbean immigration to the US. Booker T. Washington did not actively promote West Indian or Caribbean immigration to the United States, especially during a time when Black Americans were struggling for civil rights and economic stability. In fact, he was often concerned about how Caribbean immigrants would impact Black American labor opportunities. 1. Did Booker T. Washington support Caribbean immigration to America? No. Booker T. Washington did not actively support or promote large-scale immigration from the Caribbean. His primary focus was on improving the conditions of Black Americans who were formerly enslaved in the US, and he believed that too much immigration could hurt their economic progress. Why he did not promote West Indian immigration? Economic competition. Washington feared that West Indian immigrants might compete for jobs that should go to Black Americans, particularly in agriculture and labor fields. Limited resources for Black Americans. He believed that the US government and Black institutions needed to focus on uplifting Black Americans first, before assisting new immigrant groups. Black Americans were already struggling. Many Black Americans were being denied job opportunities, education, and land ownership. Washington feared that an influx of immigrants could push them further down the economic ladder.
And so a large group of people who actually came were groups of Africans who worked in Panama, places like that. And then later I heard you talk about the Immigration Act.
At that point, those were Jamaicans. They're identified as Jamaicans.
Well,
it's like 300,000 of them. So I'm saying that the way history records it, history is identifying those people.
Yeah, they're identified. They're remember they are identified from where they come from as far as a place, but they are Black people. They are African descendants. They're not carrying necessarily a flag, but they're not from America. These are migrant workers who. So yes, they came, and then you was right about the Immigration Act, right, where another wave of Africans came, from all parts of the Caribbean.
Yeah, but they weren't coming here in large numbers.
They came,
And they got sent back out. They came for agricultural purposes, and it was like a contract basis at a period of time, and then they shipped them back out.
yeah, some yes, but many of them stayed, and many of them intermarried with Africans here.
I don't know about that.
And then those Africans that came from the period of 1808, those groups of Africans that came from these places, they were not shipped out because they were enslaved, but they weren't originally from America. They originally the boats didn't originally take them from what we call saltwater Africans into the United States. They usually were in the Caribbean first. Large parts of Africans were broken in the Caribbean and shipped, but they're not really Caribbeans. They were just broken in those places, taught to be slaves, some of the mannerisms of enslavement, and then sold to the colonists. And then there were groups of Africans that came directly from Africa to here, and that makes up the African population, I think. My problem is again, the history of what the FBA says that they are, who they are. Is it an organization? What they do to escape that, they say that they are a lineage. But when they escape the fact that they say that they are a lineage, well, our lineage is from Africa. Our lineage is not from the places. We're African people. So what they want to do is they want to exclude the African part, and that's interesting, and we can get into some of that.
What do you mean? Specify that. What do you mean they want to exclude the African part?
So when you call them FBAs, Foundational Black Americans, these are African descent. These are people from Africa.
Yeah.
Right? They become integrated or acculturated in America.
Mm-hmm.
So I have lots of questions about that, and those questions have already been answered by scholars like Franklin Frazier and Du Bois, and a whole group of, even an important Jewish historian or anthropologist or sociologist, Melville Herskovitz. Okay, so what was interesting about my later conversation with Mike Lowry, when that other person came on and said that E. Franklin Frazier said that Africans lost their heritage. Oh, well, E. Franklin Frazier was an integrationist. He was the one of the people getting us in the burning fire by discrediting our Africanness. Our lineage is, I want to ask you, is our lineage African, or is our lineage a place that we were enslaved in? What's our lineage? Both. Well, you can say both.
Yeah, both.
But I want to hear you out. Huh?
Both. I'm saying both.
Okay, so if you say both, right, where's our genetics from? Our genetics are from where? You can say both.
Yeah, we had an ethnogenesis here.
Oh, say what?
Ethnogenesis.
Okay, I hate that word.
That's a real word. With a real definition.
Okay. Explain to me how that works.
Definition of ethnogenesis. Ethnogenesis is the process by which a distinct ethnic group is formed over time, often through shared historical experiences, cultural blending, and adaptation to new environments. This process can occur due to migration, conquest, forced displacement, or cultural evolution. Ethnogenesis typically involves the development of a unique identity, language, traditions, and social structures that differentiate the new group from its ancestral origins. Yes, the transformation of enslaved Africans in America into a distinct Black American ethnic group is a prime example of ethnogenesis. While their ancestors came from diverse African cultures, over the centuries they formed a new and unique identity separate from those in Africa. How African Americans emerged as a distinct ethnic group. 1. Diverse African origins. Enslaved Africans brought to America came from various ethnic groups, e.g. Yoruba, Igbo, Okof, Wolof, Mande, Congo. They spoke different languages and had different traditions. 2. Cultural blending. Forced to adapt to slavery in American society, these groups merged elements of their diverse African traditions while incorporating new influences. 3. Language and religion. African Americans developed a distinct dialect. AAV, or African American Vernacular English, new spiritual traditions, black Christianity with African influences, and cultural expressions, gospel, blues, jazz, rap. 4. New social and political identity. Over time, African Americans became a self-conscious group with a common history, struggle, and aspirations for freedom and civil rights. 5. Separation from African identity. Unlike recent African immigrants, African Americans are not simply Africans in America. They have a history, culture, and identity shaped by their unique experience of slavery, Jim Crow, civil rights struggles, and American life. Thus, African Americans underwent ethnogenesis, forming a new ethnic identity separate from their African ancestors.
Now, I think that's a little oversimplification because African people were coming into the Americas from 1776 until 1808, and then from 1808, they were coming in here during the illegal slave trade. And for the purposes of reparations, I will stop there, right, at that period. So these groups of Africans that were coming in, how do we know, how would I defeat E. Franklin Frazier, right? I could tell you how I could defeat it, but what I'm curious about is, are we saying that our connection with white people, right, in America makes us different? Or are you saying that? Because I think that's what you're saying that.
Yeah, no different than the Haitians' connection with the French makes them different. They have a lot more in common with the French. The UK have more in common with, the Jamaicans have more in common with the British than any other black or any other white person. Yeah, so the people who colonized us, matter of fact, the carnival that Jamaicans do, like they stole the Caribbean, they stole that from the Romans. So, but they brought it to themselves and they remixed it and they're half naked running around and now it's theirs. So yeah, a lot of our cultures, the Creole, the church, the Roman Catholic stuff that the Haitians do, that's the French. Yeah, so all of us in the diaspora, our cultures are piggyback from white people, our colonizers.
Okay, so that's problematic. That is problematic, and I'm glad that we're discussing it, because if we're defining ourselves in our closeness with our oppressor to make us different than other Africans, that's really problematic. For a whole host of reasons, right? To disassociate yourself from Africa and make your relationship with white people much more important is problematic. Yeah, so I think that our relationship of our lineage, right, who we are, is more common with African people than white people. Okay, so now the problem with reparations is that we're going through different constructs, right? With reparations, on how should reparations be given? It should be given land. It should be a cash payout for one generation. Should it be a trust for multiple generations? Should it be just for city residents or county residents? And so those are the issues that we are talking about. So there are different strategies of reparations. Currently, we are largely at the study stage because we found out that the federal government stage type of reparations is not going to work. So getting back to a few things. So let's just go back up to FBA. Okay. So my issue is one of our best, great, young, smart, beautiful scholars, Dr. Tyree Wright, she wrote the definitive work, Booker T. Washington and the Making of Pan Africanism, right? She was a Tuskegee. She was able to see the papers. She was able to see that it was in fact Booker T. Washington that helped defeat the African exclusion measure, and then Black folks came in. The people that were coming in, there was no infighting that we made, and then after that, shortly after that, we have one of the largest. We had Noble Drew Ali's movement. But then we had Booker T. Marcus Garvey's movement. But his movement used both blacks from the Caribbean and other places and blacks in America, right?
Now, I don't read that. I don't read he used. What I read is that he left the Caribbean. He came over here. He started his UNI movement with us, and then he wanted us to build an alliance for Africa. I was wondering why he didn't establish something with us in Jamaica first, or at least Jamaica and Africa first, and then come to us like some old triangular deal. Like, why would you come to us where you know little to nothing about us, you know little to nothing about Africa, and you're trying to build this alliance between the no-nots when you are Jamaican?
Was following, to his father, he was following Marcus Garvey's Back to Africa, right? And Booker T. Washington, before that, was trying to establish a base in Liberia, right? And so
but don't you think Booker T. Washington would get in touch with Liberia's government first before he tried to get us to become illegal immigrants and just force our way there? Like Garvey sent his ship to Liberia.
Yeah, well, Garvey, they had different strategies.
Wait. Garvey's strategy was to defraud FBAs. You agree? Or African Americans?
I don't think, I would not say that Garvey's strategy was to defraud. I think the United States securities laws weren't clear what Garvey was.
Brother, you got a license, not brother. Okay, when it comes to stocks, that's something I know a little bit about.
Well, maybe we have another conversation on Garvey. Right, but there were
but I'm gonna sum it up with this right here though.
Okay,
because what about the shit?
I'm gonna let you get off on
Because what about because I'm gonna need somebody to be honest about this. What about the Orion shit? First of all, his stocks, you couldn't liquidate them. He couldn't give you rocks for his stocks. Okay, so right, so he just because he had some printing background in Jamaica. So he came over here, he forged some stocks, and that's when J. Edgar said, "I got him." So, and you got to license your stocks. And what exchange market was the stocks on?
None.
Right. So he's defrauding us, making us believe that money or something is back, oil, something, some type of good is rice is backed by these stocks. Absolutely nothing. But the main thing that got him was that he looked at the Orion shit and he told black folks, "Hey, buy this stock and you'll have a piece of that shit." And he never even owned it. So that's defrauding. That's no fraud. Like the dude, that's scamming.
Yes, I do have that. Garvey didn't come up with that. People in his organization came up with that, but nevertheless, he's responsible for that. But outside of that,
what about hooking up the KKK and praising Jim Crow?
Say that again.
What about hooking up with the KKK and then praising Jim Crow amongst them? That's cool at the very fine.
I'm not going to disagree, but again, the Nation of Islam was trying to have a conversation.
Yeah, and we be wondering, like, why do you go to the worst of white society to build an alliance? Like, these are the rejects. White society don't even take them serious. These are the why are we going to the rejects of a society?
These are problems in which we study. And yes, Garvey is responsible for, first of all, I mean, it would have been devastating at that time period for ships to leave the United States to go to Africa with thousands of people on, and those ships, some of those ships that he bought that wasn't even seaworthy. It would have been devastating if we would have lost so many people. It would have been
why
worse.
Are we even fleeing? Like, why are we fleeing? Like, so he's bringing that fleeing mindset over here. It's like, yo, why are we even fleeing?
Okay, these are Well, okay, so why? Because it was a Back to Africa movement, right? And that's my problem when I start talking about this FBA rhetoric, that they act as if there wasn't a movement for African people who were tired of uh, the integration in America, those concepts, to go on a path themselves and to leave white America. And so FBAs in their rhetoric, not all of them, but what I've heard is what they do is oversimplify things and make it an attack against Black immigrants, right? Instead of looking at some of the root causes. What I am saying is that the reparations movement has been started way before them. Now it's morphed into city and county, right? Less emphasis is on the federal. I think that people understand that. I think, but at the same time, it's already going on, right? There are cities and counties that have reparation structures.
In general, I am not a big proponent of local reparations because I think that local municipalities don't have enough money for the most part. Now, I do believe that they have a job to do, right? So I think of it as like a prosecution. If you are New York or if you are California, what your job, to me, the best job or one of the good jobs that you could do is put together studies about everything that your state did to plunder ADOS, to take and steal from us, and send all of that. We can use that then to show the government, hey, look, this is how all of these states did us, and this is how all of the ways we were robbed. I don't think those people have enough to pay reparations. I think Evanston is one of the worst cases where they use bingo balls to pay out some reparations for home refurbishment to some older people or whatever the case may be. So I do believe that some of this is going to be smoke and mirrors, not all of it.
Why did they write you out?
In general,
our aim at the ADOS Advocacy Foundation is to create a piece of federal legislation that can comprehensively satisfy our community's needs. We view local reparations programs as a contradiction and very unlikely to achieve their stated purpose of compensating for the economic legacy of slavery. This is because states and localities confront enormous budgetary impediments concerning direct cash payments, the most symbolically and materially significant component of any repair initiative for past harms. Moreover, it seems that those states or localities that do pursue reparations programs for slavery and ongoing discrimination have focused their efforts exclusively on the latter set of harms, most often via programs that seek to redress victims of unjust housing policies that began in the latter half of the 20th century. In many cases, these offenses were not unique to ADOS.
I'm just trying to say is now the grassroots people can be involved. I don't have a problem with that. But if they want to help organize themselves, give some real definitions. Because if you go in there and start talking about 1526, you fail the state of claim. So let's move on.
Okay.
All right. So, and I don't know where to go because I look at legal challenges of reparations. I look at the case law. I look at, I write about it. I learned from the Farmer Pellman's case about what states a claim and why it failed. And then I see a lot of people following. Tariq Nasheed is the spokesperson of FBA. Following a one person without an organization is always problematic, even if the person is a good person. It's problematic. So I have a problem unless they were kind of elected to a position and stuff and you choose. But generally, right now, I'm not gonna say anything bad.
A lot of FBAs, Brother Reggie, a lot of FBAs don't necessarily follow Tariq like that.
See, that's the problem. But he created the term.
Okay.
He created the movement.
So Jesse Jackson, we don't follow him.
So I'm gonna tell you where I am in, right? In that the problem is with this group is that they want to separate out the African identity. They want to their thinking, FBA thinking, is more like integrationist movement with perks. Give us reparations and fine, right? I have not seen them in any of the major movements that have to deal with social justice. When they do that, they're part of other organizations. They may call themselves FBAs, whatever that is, but I just think it's a loose-knit group. Now, I could talk to you on Bias Sports, and you've been in organizations.
Yeah.
You told me 2 organizations that you've been in with structure.
And 5%.
Yeah, Garvey's a tough deal. Garvey's a tough deal. I'm going to say, ladies and gentlemen, Unbiased Sport will probably beat my ass when it comes to Garvey, but I still respect Garvey, right? So with that said, I'm going to have to gather up my pennies because this audience of yours is not supporting me.
I got you.
All right. So peace. Thank you so much. Right? And support Unbiased Sports too. Support him too. Support all the content creators that do this work. So with this said, and Mika, hey, thanks for coming in and checking on your brother Reggie. I appreciate it. So with that said, sorry family, you ain't get a cursing and screaming. You got grown man talk. Unbiased Sports and brother Reggie.